All right. Good afternoon, everybody. Today, we are going to be talking to you about young tech leaders of the Middle East, and also give you a bit of a crash course on human-centered design. So if you're not familiar with it, that's totally okay. We are going to walk you through it. And I am curious, where is everyone dialing in from today? You can either unmute yourself and shout it out loud, or you can type it in the chat box. I'm currently in Ohio in the United States.
I'll jump in as well. I'm right now in Barcelona, Spain.
Very cool.
Hi, everyone. I'm dialing in from the Netherlands.
Cool. Thank you for joining, Jad. I see Southern Turkey in the chat box, Palestine, Kurdistan, Iraq, Iraq. Okay, wonderful. We've got a couple countries. So welcome again. Throughout this session, if you have questions, feel free to put it in the chat box, but I will reserve questions for the end. So I'll get to it after we complete the session. And to give you a rough overview of today's presentation, we will go over the program and what human-centered design is for the first half hour. We'll then have a Q&A session with our design experts, Meltem and Christina. And finally, we'll end with open QA if you have questions about the program, human-centered design, or just questions for us. Cool. So we'll do some intros. My name is Michelle. I'm the founder of Young Tech Leaders. I have worked in the tech industry for several years. I currently run a data team at Bloomberg. Before I joined the tech industry, I worked in international education. I taught English in Malaysia, Taiwan, and India. And I've also been involved with UNHCR, researching the impact of technology on refugee communities. I'm very passionate about this issue of bridging the digital and financial inequality divide. So with that, I will pass it on to Meltem.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining to the session today. I am based in Barcelona, but before moving here, I lived for many years in the Netherlands, in Armenia, in the US, where I have done my undergrad with Michelle, actually, and a few other places in the Middle East. I'm originally from Turkey, from Istanbul, and I have lived in Egypt as well for my undergrad exchange program. Currently, I work as a senior UX researcher, user experience researcher at a European startup company called Globo, where we do online delivery services. We have web and app services. So yeah, that's me. Christina?
Oh, you're muted.
And I'm muted. I said, hi, everyone. I'm Christina. I am based in New York City, and I grew up around here, although my family is from many different parts of the world. So Lebanon, Ukraine, mostly. So being here in New York, where there's so many different cultures and wonderful vibrancy feels very much like home. So I am a user experience researcher, strategist, and designer. I work as a consultant, so that means I get to experience a lot of different industries, a lot of different types of projects, and I've done lots of work in healthcare, so partnering with some of the health systems in the US to try and figure out how we can create a better experience for the patients within the health system and the employees within the health system, so that people can ultimately focus on what matters most, which is getting the care that they need. And I come from the world of social science, but I also am very versed in design principles as well. So I am looking forward to supporting all of the participants in this program as we move forward.
Cool. Thank you. All right. So before I dive into the details of the program, I'm just going to go over the important information first. So the logistics. Young Tech Leaders of the Middle East will take place this summer from July 10th to August 1st on Saturdays and Sundays for about 4 hours each day. So usually from 3 to 7 p.m. GMT plus 3. It will be entirely online, so you do need computer and internet access, and it's completely free to apply and to participate. We will select 25 youth for this first cohort. So what is Young Tech Leaders? I'm very excited to talk to you guys about this actually. So it is a 3-week virtual technology leadership program for conflict affected and refugee youth from the Middle East. We aim to provide youth with a holistic toolkit to become effective leaders in technology by equipping them with leadership skills and a human-centered design approach to problem solving. So what does that mean? This program was basically founded on the idea that technology by itself cannot solve all issues. Technology is wonderful, right? Like it's a powerful tool that you can use for a lot of solutions when used in the right way, but you really need to think about the human first and also think about the human need you are solving for, rather than just throwing technology at a problem. So this program is about putting the focus back on the things that matter, which are the tools and skills to lead effectively and also be successful in the workplace, the network to meet other people within the global tech community, and also the opportunity to problem solve and think critically through a human-centered approach. So we accomplish this by providing 3 things. We have leadership skills workshops, we have panels with leaders and entrepreneurs from around the world, and we have human-centered design training sessions. And I'll talk through each of these. So there will be 5 interactive skill building workshops hosted by people who are like leaders, managers, and mentors in their own communities. And we will focus on communication, teamwork, critical thinking, values and goal setting, and civic engagement, which is the idea of how do you serve your community? How do you give back as a leader? And these are skills that are not really taught in the classroom. They're not really taught in the workplace, but they are so important for your everyday success, right? You can be the best coder or designer, but if you can't work with the team or you can't problem solve on your own, then you won't succeed. So we want to provide these workshops for you so you can build up these skills and walk away with a very practical understanding of what it means to be a leader. We'll also have panel events with, as I said, like founders and entrepreneurs, but also product managers, designers, authors, humanitarians, a lot of inspiring people who you'll have the opportunity to hear from, speaking on topics like launching their own business, technology for all, and careers in product. These are people who are at all stages of their careers. So we have some CEOs or people who have founded multiple companies, but also people just starting their first company or earlier on in their career. And we also will have, a blend of genders, countries, backgrounds, skill sets. So it'll be quite a, diverse mix of people. And you'll have opportunities to, ask them questions during Q&A sessions and network with them. The purpose of these panels is so that you can really connect with a lot of different people in the tech community and also see role models, not just from around the world, but also from the Middle East. And finally, we will train you on human-centered design. So Meltem and Christina are the experts here, and they are putting together a custom curriculum for the program. Basically, human-centered design is a creative and empathetic approach to problem solving, which you can use not just for design, but pretty much anything in your life. It's a method of thinking, which basically puts the human at the center of a problem. And I think that's very important in the tech industry, especially. So during the program, Melton will train you on the human-centered design framework and some of the tools and methods you can use. Christina will teach you about design critique, where you receive and give feedback on each other's work, and she will host a prototype feedback day. You will also get to work on a human-centered design project of your own, tackling any real-world issue in small teams. And at the end of the program, you will present your project to a panel of judges. And finally, something that is not on the slide, but that is very important for this whole program is that you will have mentors. So there will be mentors for each of the teams, guiding them throughout the human-centered design process. And after the program ends, you will also be paired with one-on-one mentors who you can talk to about career advice, leadership advice, or anything else. So to kind of sum that up, the goal of this program is for you to walk away with practical leadership skills, a wider network in the tech community, so plenty of people you can partner or collaborate with in the future, and also a more creative, collaborative, and empathetic mindset for leadership, because we believe that's the mindset you need to be a successful leader. And you will also receive a certificate of completion at the end of the program. And of course, you are also joining a community here. So we hope that your participation doesn't end with this program. We want to build out a larger alumni network where you will be able to take part in other events, programs, and continue building those relationships. So who is eligible to apply? You can apply if you are 18 to 25 years old, if you currently live in the Middle East, if you come from a conflict-affected or vulnerable background, and that is self-defined. I won't define that for you. If you are involved in tech in some way, so this is also self-defined. Maybe you enjoy doing graphic design on the side, maybe you studied something tech-related in school, however you want to define what that means. And finally, you do need an advanced knowledge of English because the programming is in English. So how to apply? Go to our website. There is an application link that will go to a Google form that you can fill out. There will be basic survey questions as well as a short quiz just to test your comprehension and research skills. If you are selected to move on to the next phase, you will be invited to write a short essay on one of two topics. So one topic is, what does leadership mean to me? And the other topic is, think of a problem in your community and how you might use human-centered design to solve it. You will have 1 week to return that. If you are invited for the next round, you will be asked to submit a 5-minute video teaching something to your cohort. It could be a topic that you know a lot about, maybe like video games or sports, or it could be a skill you have. So maybe you know how to make an amazing coffee. It can be anything, really. It does not have to be a serious topic. Basically, we are trying to get to know you as a person. So your personality, your communication style, etc. And finally, candidates who pass the third round will be invited for 20-minute interviews. I encourage everyone to apply, even if you're not sure or if you don't think you'll be selected, because what's the worst case scenario? You don't get in, no big deal. Best case scenario, you do get selected. So it never hurts to try. We also especially encourage women to apply because we want to fight against the gender divide in technology. It's still very much a male-dominated industry, so we want to make sure there's equal representation of men and women. So with that, I will now move on to a crash course on human-centered design. Show of hands. I think there is a hand emoji in Zoom. Who has heard of human-centered design before this session? You can also put it in the chat box, a yes or a no. Have you heard of human-centered design before? Okay, I see a mix of answers. Yeah, yes, no, a little bit. I don't think so. Okay, cool. All right, so it sounds like everyone is coming from a little bit of a different background. That's great. So human-centered design is all about building a deep empathy with the people you're designing for, generating tons of ideas, building prototypes, sharing what you've made with the people you're designing for, and eventually putting your solution out in the world. So when you think of like traditional product design, it often comes top down from the company. So like a company will create, design, and implement like a new product or service without involving users in the process. So human-centered design actually flips this trend. You start with the people you are designing for, and then end with the solution that is specifically made for their needs. It sounds very simple, but it actually involves a lot of work. There is a lot of experimentation and failure, a lot of flexibility, and it also requires the willingness to take on a growth mindset. And what I mean by growth mindset is the idea that we don't have all the answers, right? So we can't start a project pretending we know the answer. Instead, we have to start by admitting we don't know the solution, but through the process of listening to users, experimenting, getting feedback, and iterating, we will eventually get there. The human-centered design framework can kind of be split into 3 stages. So there is the inspiration phase, which is when you are learning directly from the people you are designing for as you immerse yourself in their lives and come to understand their needs. This is sometimes also called like user research or the discovery stage. You are basically deep diving into the people you're designing for. There is the ideation phase, which is when you make sense of what you learned, identify opportunities for design, and prototype possible solutions. So prototyping is one of the most important parts of the human-centered design process. It's basically a very simple model of what you want to build. And it can be a physical prototype, like a cardboard cutout of a phone app. So someone can, test the mobile app functions. It could be a service prototype. So maybe you are testing person-to-person interaction. It could even be testing how people interact with a space if you are creating a store, for example. And the purpose of prototyping is so that users can test your solution and give you feedback. Something to note is that prototypes are not meant to be perfect. In fact, you will probably get a lot of things wrong, and that's totally fine. The purpose is to get something out so that you can learn from it, iterate, and eventually, refine your idea into the final product or service. And finally, there's implementation. So that is when you bring your solution to life and eventually to market. So implementation deals with all the details about how to actually launch your product or service, like figuring out the funding, the business model, how you'll make money, the timeline to launch it, and also the metrics you want to collect so you can measure your impact. So what? Like, why is human-centered design useful? And, why is it important? Why do we talk about it? So one, it's a creative approach to problem solving that is flexible and responsive to human needs. So once again, you are not tackling a problem by assuming you know the answer. You are admitting you don't know the answer and collecting a lot of data and research and then adapting it to the specific users you are designing for. It's also essential for companies to create products and services that are not just relevant and timely, but also widely accepted by users. So the worst thing a company can do is roll out a product or service that they think is great, but no one else thinks is great and no one else uses it. That would be a huge waste of time and money. And finally, it's a productive way to prioritize what content, features, and functions to build. So there's a ton of stuff, there might be a ton of stuff you want to do, but if you have a short timeline, you need to focus first on, the most important functions or features to build out for users. All right, so now I am going to walk you through some tools and methods you can use at each stage of the human-centered design process. So during your inspiration phase, interviewing your users is probably one of the most important steps. This is when you are trying to understand your users' hopes, desires, and aspirations by talking to them directly, but more specifically by listening to them. And there are many ways you can do this. You can do like one-on-one interviews, large group interviews, or even large surveys. When you're interviewing someone, it's best to do it in a place that they are comfortable in, maybe their house. You want to start by asking broad questions about their life, their values, their habits, before you ask more specific questions about the challenge that you're trying to solve. You also want to make sure that you write down exactly what they are saying, not what you think they might mean. And if you are not sure, you should clarify. And finally, you want to be aware that what they say is only one data point. You also want to look at like their body language and their surroundings to give you more context to their answers. Extremes and mainstreams is talking to both extreme users and the average users. And the reason is because a solution that works for the most extreme people will probably work for everyone else. And so when I say extreme users, I mean, maybe you want to talk to someone who is elderly and someone who's a child. Maybe you want to talk to someone who is a subject matter expert and someone who knows nothing about the subject. And then a card sort is when you make a deck of cards and each card has a single word or picture on it. You give that to someone and they rank the cards in order of importance to them. And the purpose of that activity is to understand what matters the most. And then you can use the cards to start a deeper conversation about what that person values and why. So moving on to ideation. So after you've conducted your research and activities from your inspiration phase, you will probably have a lot of ideas about what you want to do. So now you can bundle your ideas. So in this exercise, you can literally write down a bunch of ideas like on sticky notes, and then you put them on a wall and just start moving them around and group them in similar themes and patterns. And by doing this, you will start to see like patterns emerge. You'll start to understand what type of product or service or solution you want to create. Another method is creating frameworks. So this is like a visual representation of a system, like a journey map. So a journey map is when you are mapping out the end-to-end process for something. For example, if I want to know, what is it like for someone to take a loan out of a bank? Well, first they need to go to the bank website, then they need to log in with their username and password, then they need to click on this button, etc. Basically, this will help you understand the different decision points and pain points that a person might face. And finally, implementation. So a couple tools here. You can do live prototyping, which is when you basically stress test your complete solution in a real world setting. So similar to a business pilot, but this is still very much a testing phase where you are also doing real-time troubleshooting. Like you are watching how users interact with your solution and understanding where your solution works and where it doesn't work so that you can improve it. The roadmap is where you create a timeline and plan of action for how you are trying to implement your solution. So you can understand like the schedules, expectations, the stakeholders in your project, and who is responsible for each part. And finally, monitor and evaluate. So this is just figuring out how you want to measure the effectiveness or the impact of your solution. And this can be tricky because there's not always obvious numbers you can capture. If you are trying to change a community's behavior, for example, you'll need a more nuanced approach. So maybe you are collecting data through observation or feedback. All right, so that wraps up the crash course on human-centered design. I am now going to ask Christina and Meltem a few questions so that you can hear about their experiences and understand how they are using it in their jobs. So I'll start with the first question of how do you use human-centered design in your job? And I'll pass that to Meltem first.
All right. By the way, if there's any questions to clarify anything that I'll say, please unmute yourself during this session. It's an important question because essentially our jobs as, researchers, designers, and so on is to help manage uncertainty. And as we build a product, as we build a solution for our community, however you want to phrase it, it's about helping decision makers, it could be product managers, product directors, to make informed decisions. So once again, it's about human-centered design. For me, is about reducing risk. So I don't use it in my current context, which is a very fast-moving tech company in an agile setting. We are operating very fast. Every day unfolds huge changes. So I take it as what Michelle was saying earlier. It's a way of thinking rather than a rigid formula of, okay, we're going to spend this much time on this, and then we're going to go to the next stage. We're going to do that. It is more of a mindset where we apply it to know more about our users, our end you can call it users or the people for whom we provide a solution. So yeah, pretty much every problem is unique. And so human-centered design is there for you to provide a mindset without rigidity. That would be my answer. What about you, Christina?
So it's interesting that you said that it's more of a mindset for you and not as much of a process, because for me, it's usually the opposite it's not the opposite because we also have the mindset, but we also implement the process. The difference here, I would imagine, is because of the work environment, right? So when you're working with a tech startup, things do tend to move extremely quickly. I, however, often work in an agency setting. So doing consulting work with larger organizations and companies that want to invest in the human-centered design process, including a very robust research phase. So oftentimes before jumping into any design decision-making, we spend, and the amount of time will vary, but there will be some amount of time that's dedicated to talking to the people who will be using this product or service, asking them questions, understanding the core roots of their problem, and then using some of these tools such as journey maps and personas that Michelle had mentioned to guide the design process. So that allows us to keep the users in mind and humans in mind as we are creating what this ultimate product or service might be, with artifacts and evidence in addition to this mindset that Meltem described so wonderfully.
And I think as a quick note, definitely agreed with Christina's comment. I also did work in agencies before joining in-house, and a lot of it is indeed similar, if not the same. But what if I can give a tangible example into the lack of rigidity and more mindset is, for example, we have to deliver results and deliver it fast. And so in my current project, I needed to speak with Ukrainians as well as Spanish users for my research to understand their circumstances. But the way we designed it, because I need to finish the whole thing in 3 weeks time, and because there was the Labor's Day in Ukraine as well as an Easter, a religious holiday, we had to make do with the limited number of people we could reach. So I had to speak with the stakeholders and say, okay, let's go to Portugal now. Let's go to other countries where we can recruit faster. We're going to speak with different people. We're going to focus on different problems, and we might need to go back to Ukraine later. So we didn't have the, let's say, luxury, so to speak, to say, okay, let's extend the deadline 4 more weeks and do the research with Ukrainians. Let's deliver results with what we have now, and let's iterate a second iteration, and then let's say include Ukrainians. So that's what I mean with the mindset, and not sticking necessarily to a research plan, after which you might need to change your methods, need to change your scope, need to change your research participants. That's the truth in which we operate.
Yeah, and I think that's really points to some of the beauty of this design thinking process, because the idea is that there's no such thing as being done. There's always opportunity for change and improvement and adaptation. So even though you might be delivering based on your research with people from Portugal or other parts of the world that are not Ukraine, you still have in mind that you have the flexibility to make updates if they're necessary without sacrificing your timeline.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Thank you. And what is the most unexpected thing you've discovered during the research process?
Let's go with Christina this time to change the
order. Do you really want the answer to that question?
Yes.
So the reason there have been times where I've been doing research, especially in the healthcare space, where people have shared things with me that I was not expecting, very intense personal stories, which the reason I'm bringing that up, I don't want to name anything specific, but when you are talking to users, one of the most important things to keep in mind is empathy and patience, and also cultivating a skill of keeping people on track with the conversation and your conversation goals, because people really like to share, and people, especially the types of personalities that want to participate in these research interviews, and you get to learn so many colorful stories from individuals you may not have ever spoken to otherwise, because they're not in your immediate communities or social circles or colleagues. And so that's what makes this process so wonderful. And it also is a great way to, again, cultivate those skills of empathy and also focus.
That's a good one. And I feel like, Michelle, that was such a tricky question because as researchers, it's important for the youth to know that we do sign confidentiality agreements. So we're like therapists over there. We do listen to a lot of personal stuff, a lot of confidential stuff that we do share for the purpose of the study with the stakeholders, and yet we couldn't pass it forward to the outside public. So there is that way of honoring the information that people do share with you. And the second way through which this is a tricky question is because one thing you discover as you do design, human-centered design, is that if you're doing a research process and you don't have anything unexpected, that means probably you're doing something wrong. It's because that means that you might be reaffirming your bias. You might be doing a research where your assumptions are being reiterated. So for us, the true definition of an insight, a finding that truly is beyond observation, is when it surprises you. And most importantly, it changes the whole, the entire way you see the whole problem space. So that being said, every finding by law has to be a little surprising. I will give you one brief tangible experience within my current company, as an overview for the confidentiality thing. So I work for different product teams in the same product, the same app. We divided into many different clusters. So one team deals with payments and fraud. The other team deals with the Prime, subscription. The other team deals with the homepage and the storefront and so on. So I was doing this project and I was testing different types of communication to share with the end users the errors. Sometimes you put your credit card and it doesn't go through, and so on and so forth. So over there, we iterated a lot. Different stakeholders were in there. I was very surprised, beautifully, to understand that we had to find a middle ground in between avoiding fraudulent behavior, the kind of behavior that people do when they want to trick the system, but at the same time to abide by the best practices in design to provide action-oriented guidance. So we were in this very challenging, very in-between place where we had to both accommodate the user needs while accommodating the, anti-fraudulent payment needs. So it was a very interesting one for us to understand and find the right iteration that satisfied different parties. So that would be my answer.
Well, thank you. I'm actually really glad you brought up, the ethics or the confidentiality agreements, because it shows you how serious or how sacred that interviewing process is. It's not just, some casual questions. It's you do approach it in a very methodical way. So yeah, thanks for flagging
Absolutely,
that.
Yeah.
All right. What is your favorite feature or product you have helped build?
Which one? Which one should we go to? I'll say one that maybe the youth can identify from the Middle East. So before joining Global, I worked a lot for pharmaceuticals, for the health industry, as well as for United Nations. And for them, I was working for a project in Afghanistan remotely from Barcelona, where we worked for LOTFA. That's a trust fund that is made up of contributors to Afghanistan's securities. I don't want to bore you with details, but long story short, the solution I had to provide was to literally speak with all the ambassadors, all the people who help provide funds to make Afghanistan a safer place, to see what kind of hub, what kind of platform, online platform or application we need to build for them so that they have all the information they need. They can access United Nations reports, and we know we could make this fund workplace a lot more interactive and solution oriented and easy to use. It was a very challenging one. I was happy with the results because there is a lot of changing with the staff members, people who, let's say I'm from Germany, I work in the embassy, but then 3 years later I'll go somewhere else. So what kind of platform should we create that could make onboarding for new people, as well as maintaining the interest and the current procedures of the old ones? So it was a long project. Long for tech means 4 months in my experience, and it was finally one that was intuitive, easy to use, and fun. Yeah. Christina, I'll give the ball to you.
Yeah, so my example is also in healthcare. One of the things that we created, I was working with a large health system in New York City, which means that the people who are patients of this health system are extremely diverse. They come from many different cultural backgrounds, many different socioeconomic backgrounds. And so one of the things that we wanted to do was to make it very easy for anyone, no matter what kind of background you come from, to access and navigate the health system. And one of the ways that we did this was by just making communication with the health system a lot more accessible. So instead of here in the US, a lot of times you have to call the doctor, you wait on the phone for 30 minutes, they send you to someone else, it's the wrong person, then you wait more, then they send you to someone else, and then they take a message and call you back when you're at work the next day. So it's not very easy. So what we created was a chat system. And what this allowed people to do is they were able to access it at any time of day. So it accommodated for people no matter what type of job they're working. We used very accessible language and very familiar design patterns. So we made it look like some of the more widespread applications that people are accustomed to using, as opposed to going through these really big clunky websites. And we created a solution so that people could reach out to the doctor at any time of day. They could have a record of their conversation, and they wouldn't necessarily get a response immediately because of staffing issues on the side of the health system. But there was always a chatbot available to provide information that was very clear and concise about what they could expect in terms of receiving communications receiving communications in return, and also other options that they could have for getting the answers to the questions they needed. So that one was fun because, one, we were using more advanced technology. So natural language processing, for example, is what's used to how AI, artificial intelligence, can like understand a message that you're sending, that someone else is sending, and generate a response. So that was very fun, and it was newer to me at the time. I had never worked on a project using that technology before, and it was also solving a very widespread, very important problem. So that was definitely one of my favorites that I've contributed to.
I've experienced the long, healthcare jumping around before, so I wish they implemented that feature everywhere. Thank you for designing that.
Mm-hmm.
And all right, I will ask you one more question. What are the downsides or limitations of human-centered design, if there are any?
I think about this all the time. So, so the one thing that I am always wary of is a lot of times when people talk about human-centered design and user experience design in general, it's often framed as this process that will save the world, or like it's almost like the cure-all antidote for all of the problems that we face on this planet. However, as you saw as we were going through this process, human-centered design is actually really good at solving problems that, one, mostly involve humans, and two, are very specific and very much exist within constraints. So you're not necessarily looking at a big picture. So when it comes to creating systemic change, so things that are like, creating solutions for the climate, creating solutions for political injustice or conflict, this type of process, the things that are really going to impact, the world at large, this type of process is not the best fit, and it's often described as such. And so I think it's always really important to keep in mind, like, why human-centered design is being applied. So it's being applied because we need to solve a very specific problem that is very specific to humans, and we need to do so quickly and to operate within, you know, a set of constraints, and then you end up with a great solution. So that's what I would say is some of the biggest limitations there. I think personally, this is an opinion, if we really want to solve the very big problems of the world, we should think beyond humans. So we need to think of the whole ecosystem. So
I was like, yes, it really speaks to my mind, because there's always this, you know, human-centeredness, as, you know, we're being very egalitarian, we are being, you know, equals and everything, but it is so true. There are everything that we touch upon, and I think climate crisis is one example of that, where putting humans at the center is not enough if we're not equally aware of the consequences our actions or our decisions create for other living or non-living beings at large. So I definitely really agree with that element. And in my way of understanding this question, I was operating on a much pragmatic scale than Christina. So it will be hopefully a good
resident philosopher.
No, I have a, you know, in a philosophy department master's as well. So I really enjoy that notion of, you know, with my professors, I was mindful of that. But now that I'm in this very pragmatic place where I make a living, I also need to maybe share with the participants here, or those who will watch the recording later, that you need to understand that 80% or a vast majority of people who call themselves designers or UX researchers, myself included, are self-taught. Very few people here have a master's degree that's written UX research, UX design, or, you know, human-centered design, whatever. So we usually, I mean, I have an anthropology degree. I'm not sure what Christina studied at the university. Maybe you share with them.
Oh, I studied social science, so that it was kind of broader strokes. I did a lot of self-guided research, so it was a lot of combination of psychology and sociology research.
That's amazing. I mean, mine was human development at the center, cultural anthropology with clinical psychology, evolutionary biology. But long story short, where am I going with this? Is because everybody has a different interpretation of human-centered design, user-centered design, design thinking. So this is a richness in that everybody can bring in their unique perspective with their own set of experiences to the discussion. But at the same time, the limitation could be that we talk and we use words, but we might mean different things in application. I do feel that in my current work environment, where we have people who've studied, they do UX research, but they've studied molecular engineering before, or they studied clinical psychology, very different backgrounds, and people then use this method differently. I mean, you can call it a disadvantage, or you can call it like area of progress. But I guess Michelle was asking also for benefits. I think benefits is the liberty it provides you, and how meticulous you can be with different methods you can use, and that's a good one. Of course, in my own case, I reiterate that in a fast-moving startup, I have to also cut a lot of times short. So we don't have like 9 months research for one particular thing, but we do short iterations, which also works with human-centered design, I would say. But yeah.
All right, thank you both. I have so many more questions, but unfortunately we are limited for time. So I am going to open it up for open Q&A now. If anyone has questions about the program, human-centered design, anything else. All
Fuad
right,
has a question on the chat.
Yeah. I see he or she asked, I've started building a digital solution, a web app that would have a good and meaningful cause for my community. How can I inject the human-centered design in it? Ooh, big question. I will let either Meltem or Christina answer that briefly.
Christina, you want to go first since I answered the last question?
Yeah, I'm like, I want to respond to the question with a question, but but because one of the things that comes up for me is, with human-centered design, how can you be 100% sure that it's good for the community if you have not been using the human-centered design process? And there's many other ways to do so, in terms of, research background that you have, best practices, information that you have publicly. But I would say, I'm not sure where you are in your process of building this web app, but one of the ways that you can do so is to test it out and get feedback from the people within your community as a way of allowing the people you're serving to participate in your process of creating your design solution. So because that's another really big component. We always say we are not the users, right? So you always have to kind of take yourself out of that mindset and try to start, as if you're a child and just lead with a lot of curiosity. So at this point, if it's, like I said, if it's already something you've started creating, presenting your ideas to people, we have this part of this process called user testing or usability testing, just to make sure that if someone's looking at this from a fresh perspective, they can understand it and it's actually meeting their needs, and we get validation for some of our ideas. So I think, again, this depends on what part of your process you're in, but that could be a really great way to start.
Now, I would just add that it's a good example for you all to see Christina responding a question with a question, because that's what essentially we designers need to do, not to provide the answer, but to show what really the problem is and where we should be focusing on. So to add to what she said on top of this is that I understand, Fuad, that you didn't apply the design principles in building the app, which is in an ideal world, you would start as early as possible. And in short iterations, you continue to do your design process. But yeah, in this case, now that you have the first minimum viable product, I would say, then your next move should really be testing it, and upon your findings, reiterating it. Yeah.
Cool.
You're welcome.
Can't wait to see your web app after you've implemented this design process now. All right. Any other questions? And you all can either unmute yourself and ask it or put it in the chat box.
So I have this question about the program itself.
Mm-hmm.
So what is the number one priority when choosing your applicants? You're going to be like, based on this one priority or criteria, you're going to be maybe rejecting your applicants or choosing them?
Great question. Yeah. So I think we'll be looking at like the holistic profile, right? So what is the motivation for applying? What is your background? But I think mostly kind of that eagerness and showing that you are interested in growing and developing your either leadership skills, or you're looking to expand your network or something else. But seeing that strong motivation factor. So there are opportunities to kind of answer those questions throughout the survey or the first application you are submitting. So I would say if you can provide more details about your background and motivation, that always helps.
Thank you.
Yep. I see a question in the chat box. What do you look for in an ideal candidate to participate in the program? So I think similar question and similar response. Again, you do not need to be a design expert, coding expert. In fact, the purpose of this program is that we are welcoming people from all backgrounds, even if you've had none of that before. So I think what we're really looking for is more that motivation, excitement. Maybe you have an interesting background you think that could contribute to this program. Maybe you started some sort of project on your own, or you've worked with designers in a specific context before. It's very open-ended. And I think just bringing in that storytelling piece into the application will help us understand why you think you might be the best candidate for this. Can you share with us the acceptance rate of the program? I cannot, because this is the first time the program is running. So this is the first cohort, and I'll be happy to share the metrics afterward. But yeah, as we said, we have 25 youth for this cohort, and we will try to make sure that this is a blend of backgrounds, skill sets, gender, country, etc.
Hi, Michelle. I have a question, if I may.
Sure.
I'm curious to what success could potentially look like for you. What would be a interesting income of this cohort? That's one. And number two, in terms of learning, what would be the most valuable learning that you could potentially get out of the first cohort?
So you are asking for me, right? Not as a participant, but as the person running the program?
As an organizer, just to see what type of lasting impact this could potentially have and how people can position themselves around it.
Yeah, I'm glad you asked that question, because for me, what I'm most excited about here is the community and building something that is, very much about the relationships and bonds you're creating through this program, whether that's the youth with each other or the youth with the mentors, or even the mentors with each other. There's a lot of different layers here. We do have a Slack community, for example, where panelists, speakers, workshop leaders, youth, everyone is on that platform. So for me, success is knowing that the youth not just gain skills and feel empowered, but also will continue to interact with everyone after the program. I had mentioned briefly, the vision here is that we do build out this alumni network, and we can continue to host events and programs and, get to see everyone again, invite people back. Maybe the youth in this program become mentors for the next program. And then what was your second part of the question again?
The second question is the most valuable learning that you can get out of this. Is there an area of uncertainty that you're walking into and you would like to learn something about?
Yeah, honestly, a lot of this is a kind of a big area of uncertainty, right? I'm almost approaching this also like a human-centered design approach, in that even though, we're doing a lot of the organizing and planning, there's so much that you can't predict ahead of time as well. So I think I'm just interested in seeing, how people react to the curriculum, which parts they enjoy the most or which parts they struggle with. And also, the dynamics of the cohort too. As I said, this is the first time we're running it. So I'm interested in kind of gathering feedback from the participants of, how we can improve this in the future to make it even more engaging, even more educational, etc. So a lot of this has a bit of uncertainty, but, there's also that excitement that, we are going to, all go through this for the first time together.
Absolutely. Looking forward to seeing this. Thank you, Michelle.
Yeah, thank you for asking. And I see one question in the chat box. How advanced will the program be? I guess this depends on which aspect you're asking about and the level of advancement, but I will say generally, this is very, we want this to be inclusive to all levels. So we will start from the beginning, right? With human-centered design, we will assume you have not heard of it coming in. For each of the leadership skills, we will go through the basics and fundamentals, because, that's important to have before you build on top of that. I think the only thing that is advanced would be the level of English, since the programming is in English. So we do ask, you are comfortable speaking, reading and writing in English. There will also be light readings throughout the program. We might share articles we think that are helpful, or videos for you to watch as well. Any other questions?
I had to go out right now, but anything, Michelle will be in contact with me. I look forward to seeing you in the program for our sessions. And yeah, enjoy the rest of your day. Ciao.
Thank you for joining us, Meltem. Thanks.
My pleasure. Bye.
Bye.
Any last questions? You can pop in the chat box or unmute yourself. All right. Well, thank you everyone for attending. I hope to see all your applications. Again, doesn't hurt to try, so I really encourage you to apply. And happy Ramadan to all those who are celebrating, and also happy Mother's Day to any mothers, or if you have any mothers. So thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks, Michelle. It was nice meeting everyone here.
Have a great
Good
one.
luck.